The night I found out, my entire world collapsed in silence. His voice echoed like a distant stranger's, his smile no longer mine. I thought I was his only choice, his forever. Until the truth cut me open, leaving me to wonder if love was ever real. Or just a cruel illusion. Welcome to the Untold Love. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means everything. I still remember the first time I saw him, Daniel. It wasn't anything grand or dramatic, no sudden spotlight from the sky, no slow motion moment like in movies. It was just ordinary. And yet, in that simple, fleeting moment, something inside me shifted. He was standing across the library, leaning casually against the shelves, flipping through a book with this soft, focused look on his face. His smile wasn't wide, but it had this quiet warmth, the kind of smile that felt like a promise you didn't even know you needed. Back then, I was just Emma, an ordinary girl with dreams that seemed too big for my own hands to hold. I believed in love, believed in its magic, its power to heal, its ability to transform loneliness into something whole. But even with all that faith in my heart, I never expected to find myself drawn so strongly to someone I barely knew. Something about him felt like home, and that terrified me. Our first conversation wasn't planned. I dropped my pen, clumsy as always, and he picked it up before I even realized. "You might want to hold on tighter next time," he joked, his voice calm and teasing. I laughed, and that laugh, unpolished, nervous, was the start of everything. I never imagined how much that single moment would change me. From then on, we started talking. At first, it was small things, books, classes, the usual chatter that doesn't mean much. But the more we talked, the more I realized how effortless it felt. With him, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to shrink myself, or polish my words, or hide the little quirks that made me me. He listened, not just to what I said, but to the silences between my words. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Every evening, I found myself waiting for his messages, the ones that made my heart skip before I even opened them. Every word from him felt like sunlight seeping into the quiet corners of my world. We laughed until our stomachs hurt, shared stories about childhood scars, whispered dreams about futures we hadn't even dared to speak out loud before. I thought, no, I believed this was fate. That maybe God, the universe, whatever higher power there is, had finally handed me my piece of forever. I was falling, helplessly and hopelessly, and for the first time, I didn't mind the fall. With Daniel, I believed love could finally be real. The days that followed felt like stepping into a dream I never wanted to wake from. Daniel and I moved from small talk to hours-long conversations, the kind where time slips away and the world outside ceases to matter. I'd look at the clock, shocked to realize we had been speaking until sunrise, yet my heart felt light, as if sleep was nothing compared to the warmth I felt hearing his voice. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he made me feel. When Daniel laughed, it was like music filling a room I hadn't even realized was empty. When he listened, truly listened, it made me believe that my words carried weight, that my thoughts mattered. Slowly, his presence became woven into the fabric of my everyday life, so much so that I couldn't remember how the days felt before him. We started meeting outside of campus. Simple walks in the park became our sanctuary. The crunch of leaves under our feet, the gentle wind brushing past us, it was as though nature itself wanted to lean in and listen to our story. I would glance at him, watching the way he tilted his head when he was deep in thought, and I'd catch myself smiling without reason. Then there were the little rituals we unknowingly built. A morning text from him was always the first spark of my day. A goodnight call, often ending with sleepy laughter, became the lullaby I didn't know I needed. Every message, every moment, every touch of connection felt like proof that I had finally found what so many people spend their lives searching for: love that feels safe, love that feels true. And yet, beneath all that sweetness, there were moments that made me pause. Sometimes, when I looked into his eyes, I'd notice a faraway look, as though he was wandering through memories I couldn't reach. His silences were not frequent, but they were heavy, like a door closing quietly in the middle of a sentence. I'd ask him about it, gently, but he would brush it off, change the subject, and I, hopelessly in love, let it go. Still, in those early days, I held on to the beauty more than the shadows. His hand in mine, his voice at the other end of the line, his smile lighting up even the dullest evenings, I let those moments define us. Love, after all, is built on trust, and I trusted him with every fragile piece of my heart. Little did I know, love can bloom beautifully even when roots are tangled in secrets. Love, in its purest form, feels unshakable. And for a while, I clung to that belief with every fiber of my being. Daniel and I were still sharing laughter, still building moments that seemed picture-perfect. But as time passed, I began to notice the smallest fractures forming, cracks so faint at first that I told myself they didn't matter. Yet deep down, I felt them. It started with his silences. Not the comfortable kind we used to share while sitting together, but silences that carried weight, like unfinished sentences left hanging in the air. There were evenings when I'd ask him a simple question, and his eyes would wander, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. He would smile quickly, almost as if to reassure me, but the smile never quite reached his eyes. Then came the nights when we'd talk on the phone until he grew quiet, his voice trailing off. Once, in the middle of the night, I woke to the faint buzz of my phone. It was Daniel, asleep on the call, and I heard him murmur a name. A name that wasn't mine. Lily. My chest tightened instantly, like someone had pressed the air out of my lungs. When I asked him about it the next morning, my voice trembling though I tried to hide it, he chuckled softly and said, "Just a dream, Emma. Nothing more." He brushed it aside with such ease, and I wanted to believe him. I forced myself to. Because what was love if not trust? What was commitment if not faith in the person you've chosen? But once doubt finds a way in, it grows like a shadow you can't escape. I started noticing other little things. The way he avoided talking about his past, skipping over details whenever I asked about his old friends or high school years. The way his phone lit up sometimes, and he'd quickly turn it face down, saying it was nothing important. My heart told me not to question it, not to ruin what we had. But my mind whispered louder with each passing day, who was Lily? Why did her name live in his dreams? Why did it linger in the spaces he kept from me? I tried to drown those whispers in love, telling myself that every relationship has its imperfections, that no one comes without history. But the unease grew, a quiet storm gathering in my chest. It was the first time I felt the cold edge of uncertainty in what I thought was an unbreakable bond. And though I smiled through it, a part of me knew something wasn't right. The truth has a way of showing itself, even when we try to bury it under trust, hope, and love. I learned that on a night I'll never forget, the night when everything I believed about us was stripped away in a single glance. Daniel and I had been invited to a small gathering by one of his friends. It was nothing extravagant, just a handful of people, laughter filling the air, music humming softly in the background. I remember holding his hand, feeling that familiar comfort, telling myself that whatever doubts had crept into my heart were nothing but fears I had invented. For a brief moment, I wanted to believe we were unshakable again. And then she walked in. Her name was Lily. I didn't know her then, not truly, but I knew instantly who she was. It wasn't because someone introduced us, it was because of him. Daniel's hand slipped slightly from mine when his eyes found hers. His entire face lit up in a way I had never seen before, brighter, fuller, as though a missing piece of him had just walked into the room. I stood there frozen, smiling politely as people mingled, but inside my chest, something cracked wide open. Whispers around me filled in the gaps I hadn't wanted to see. They used to be inseparable, someone said softly behind me. Daniel and Lily, everyone thought they'd end up together. Each word felt like salt on an open wound. Suddenly, everything made sense, the silences, the names spoken in his sleep, the distance I sometimes felt. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining it. I had been living in the shadow of a love that had never truly ended. Daniel introduced me to her, his voice too careful, his smile too familiar. And Lily, she was beautiful in a way that made my insecurities roar to life. Confident, graceful, carrying a history with him that I could never compete with. When our eyes met, hers held a softness, maybe even pity, as though she understood more than I did. In that moment, the room blurred around me. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, it all faded into a dull hum. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, breaking rhythmically inside me. That night, as I lay awake beside him, his breathing steady, mine uneven, one thought consumed me: was I ever truly his choice? Or just the replacement for the one he couldn't have? The truth had revealed itself. And it was devastating. I could only carry the weight of silence for so long. The questions burned inside me, clawing at my heart until I could no longer pretend. That night, after the gathering, I stared at Daniel across the room, watching him laugh at something on his phone, as if nothing had shifted, as if my world hadn't been split wide open. My hands trembled. My throat felt tight. I knew if I didn't speak now, the truth would drown me. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice thinner than I intended. "Tell me about Lily." He froze. Just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. His eyes lifted to mine, searching, weighing whether he could dodge the question again. But I didn't let him. No excuses. No jokes. "I need the truth. Who is she to you?" The silence between us was unbearable. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, he exhaled, slow and heavy, as if the weight of years rested in that breath. "She was my first love," he admitted quietly, almost too soft to hear. "Emma, before you, there was her. And a part of me. Never really let go." It felt like the ground split beneath me. My chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand why he had let me believe I was enough when his heart was still tethered to another. Instead, my voice cracked in a whisper: "So what am I to you, Daniel? A distraction? A consolation prize?" His face twisted in pain, but he didn't deny it. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back as if his touch burned. "I love you, Emma," he said, his voice pleading, "but she will always be a part of me. I didn't mean for this to happen." Love. The word sounded hollow, broken, cheap in that moment. How could love coexist with lies? How could it live in a heart still haunted by someone else's name? Tears blurred my vision, hot and relentless. My body shook as humiliation wrapped around me like chains. I had built my world around him, believed every smile, every promise, and yet, I was never truly chosen. I was only standing in the shadow of a ghost he couldn't release. That night, I walked away. My legs felt heavy, my heart shattered into pieces so small I wondered if it could ever be whole again. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I simply left, quietly, broken, but determined not to beg for a place I was never meant to fill. And as the door closed behind me, I knew my story with Daniel had collapsed. But what scared me most was realizing I didn't know how to live without him. In the days after I left Daniel, silence became my closest companion. My phone no longer buzzed with his messages, and the absence felt deafening. Nights were the hardest, lying awake, my mind replaying every memory, every laugh, every whispered promise. I asked myself endlessly, were any of those moments real? Or were they all stitched together from a love that was never fully mine? Grief came in waves. Some mornings, I couldn't move. I'd stare at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal pressing down until breathing itself felt like a chore. Other days, anger flared hot and wild. I hated him for holding my heart carelessly, for letting me believe I was enough when I was only filling the empty space someone else had left behind. But beneath the anger, I hated myself more, for not seeing the signs, for clinging so tightly to something fragile, for giving every piece of me without keeping any part safe. But life, even in its cruelty, has a way of teaching us how to rise. Slowly, I found small ways to heal. I began writing in a journal, pouring out words I couldn't speak aloud. Each page held my pain, my confusion, my longing, but also my slow rediscovery of who I was beyond Daniel. I started taking walks again, alone this time. At first, the empty space beside me hurt, but with every step, I felt something shift. I began noticing things I had overlooked before: the way the sunlight warmed my skin, the laughter of children in the park, the quiet peace of leaves swaying in the wind. The world was still beautiful, even if my heart was broken. Friends reached out, some gently reminding me that I deserved better, others simply sitting with me in silence. And in those moments, I realized love exists in many forms, not just in romance, but in the care of people who refuse to let you drown. Day by day, I reclaimed myself. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped waiting for a message that would never come. I stopped defining my worth by whether or not I was someone's first choice. Instead, I began to see that I could be my own choice, that love could be found in the way I treated myself, the way I honored my own heart. Healing wasn't fast, and it wasn't clean. But it was real. And with every scar, I grew stronger. For the first time, I believed that even if love had broken me, I still had the power to write a new story, one where I was enough, even on my own. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest pain. I didn't believe it at first. I thought the ache of Daniel would remain etched into me forever. But as the months passed, the tears came less often, and the weight on my chest grew lighter. Healing wasn't a sudden miracle, it was a quiet, steady unfolding, like dawn slowly breaking after a long, merciless night. One morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in a long while, I didn't see the broken girl who had walked away from him. I saw someone different, someone stronger, someone braver. The pain had carved new depth into me, but it had also revealed a resilience I never knew I had. I realized then that love doesn't always come in the form of a partner who chooses you first. Sometimes, the most powerful love is the one you give yourself, the choice to rise, to keep moving, to believe you are enough, even when someone else couldn't see it. Daniel had been my beginning, but he didn't have to be my ending. Looking back, I no longer feel humiliation when I think of being his second choice. Instead, I feel gratitude for the lessons it left me. Because through the heartbreak, I discovered my worth isn't tied to someone else's decision. My value isn't diminished by their inability to love me fully. I am not a shadow. I am not a substitute. I am a whole story, complete on my own. Sometimes, I still wonder what might have been if he had chosen differently. But those thoughts no longer haunt me, they visit like passing clouds, drifting and dissolving. What stays is the certainty that I deserve a love that doesn't hesitate, a love that doesn't linger on the past, a love that looks at me and sees only me. And maybe one day, that love will come. But even if it doesn't, I have already found something precious: the peace. Peace in knowing I can stand tall after being shattered. Peace in knowing that being alone is not the same as being unloved. Peace in realizing the greatest love story I'll ever live is the one I create with myself. So yes, I was once his second choice. But today, I am my first. And that truth is enough to carry me forward.